I'm Jill Wood, and this is my son Jonah. We're going to show you how to do showmanship for 4-H poultry. I've been a poultry leader for about 13 years now, and this is Jonah's second year in the poultry project. Jonah's left-handed and I'm right-handed, so we thought that it would be beneficial for you to see the easiest and most comfortable ways to show the birds, whether you're left-handed or right-handed. Before we get the birds out though and start the actual physical handling of the birds for showmanship, we wanted to go over some of the things that you need to do showmanship. Before you get started is a white lab coat and a mat of some kind. You can usually pick these up at places that sell carpet. They'll often give them to you for free. They're old carpet samples. And this book is really important. This is the standard of perfection. It's what judging of poultry is based on. It's published by the American Poultry Association. So you can order copies on their website. The 4-H office has one copy that they can lend out as well. It's important because oftentimes the questions that you get asked as part of showmanship by the judge are things from this book. So you need to know the breed of poultry that you're showing, and maybe even some of the other kids' birds. Sometimes they'll even ask you to switch birds, and they might ask you questions about someone else's breed. So that's all in this book. So it's important to at least have looked through it, even if you don't own a copy. So when you start to approach the table for showmanship, you're going to have your bird in one hand and your mat tucked under the other. You won't set the bird down until the judge asks you to do so. Before we do that though, before we place our birds on the table, I wanted to mention about choosing a bird for showmanship. The 4-H booklet stipulates that it has to be one of the birds that you're using for confirmation, which is great because the bird should be one that has reasonably good confirmation, is a good representative of its breed. But you also want to choose one that's quiet and easy to handle, one that maybe you've even put a little bit of time into training. The birds can be trained with mealworms, or some of them get really excited about cat food, believe it or not, and you can teach them to stand up nicely just by holding the food out in front of their beaks, so that they'll pose nicely for the judges. If you have a friendly rooster, sometimes they make great showmanship birds because they do tend to show off a little bit better sometimes, so that's a consideration as well. You have your lab coat, your mat. It's nice to have something under your lab coat that makes it look like you made a little effort with your appearance, so a shirt with a collar, and it's important to have safe footwear on your feet, so no flip-flops or sandals, but something that covers your toes. So it's important to know that the judge could be watching you even before you get to the table, so it's really important that you take the bird out of its cage the proper way, which is head first. That way its wings don't get caught as it's coming out of the cage. Sometimes they may use things like that if they're at the end of their judging and it's been a really, really close competition. So they might think back to how the 4-H member got the bird out of the cage or placed it back in the cage after the competition. So always be on, I guess, once you are getting ready for showmanship. So once you arrive at the table and the judge asks you to set your bird down, you'll put your mat down. And normally when you're right-handed, like I am, the most natural way to stand the bird down is with it facing to the left. However, there's nothing that says that you have to do that. For Jonah, it's more comfortable. His bird's going to be facing right. So go ahead there, bud. And ideally, if the judge asked you to pose your bird, you're going to pose it to its best advantage. So if it has one side that looks better than the other for some reason, maybe if another bird had been picking on it and it had a couple of scabs on one side of its comb, or it was missing a feather on one side, you're going to show the best side of your bird. If it's equally good looking on both sides, then set it down in the direction that's the most comfortable. And again, you want it to sort of stand up pretty and look nice for the judge, so kind of encourage it to stand up. Obviously you don't want it to fly away during the competition, especially at fairs that are sort of in an outdoor location. You don't want to have to chase the chicken all over the fairgrounds, so keep one hand on it or very close to it so that you can, if it starts to fidget, you can reposition it and keep it secure. So then the judge is probably going to start by asking you to show parts of the bird. So the easiest way to pick them up is to slide your hand down their breast between their legs, and I like to use my thumb on the outside of one leg, and my ring finger and baby finger on the outsides of the other leg. Which fingers you use to grasp the legs is up to you. You know, maybe it's okay with just your pinky on the outside leg, and they should be resting on your forearm. And then you can press the wings into your body and use the other hand to hold the wings down so you don't get flapped like I just did. And Jonah would, again, does the same thing but with the opposite hand, so that his bird's facing the other way. So your showmanship bird should be very clean. We did a video on prepping your birds for show, and your showmanship bird obviously should be prepped the same way before its competition as well. One of the first things the judges may ask you to show could be the feet. So to show the feet, we would turn the bird over against ourselves and then use your free hand to show both the top and the bottom of each foot. And all the time that you're doing this, you should be looking at the judge as much as possible. So if you can get good at this and be able to do that without really looking down at the bird's feet, so that you're watching the judge all the time, that's great. And then once you're good, you can return the bird to this position so that you're ready to show the next part. Another possible part would be the wings. So sometimes they'll ask an individual wing if they're really trying to weed out who's the best show person. They may ask to see the left wing. If that happens, you have to remember which one is the bird's left wing, because depending on how you're holding them, their left may not line up with your left. So if we're doing the right wing, then you want to show up and down, and you want to make sure that your arms aren't in the way of showing the judge. So I can't, go like this because I'm covering up the wing. So you need to be able to do it without, and if you can reach under the bird, which is not easy, and show it this way, and your hand's totally out of the way. But if your arms aren't long enough for that, then you really just have to try to go from the top. Find that joint in the wing, just really spread it out. And then the opposite wing, left, is easier because your hand's not in the way at all. The tail is an easy one. You're just going to turn the tail towards the judge, and then you're going to go up and down with the tail feathers. Like that. The head is a fun one. I always tell my poultry members you have to pretend you're a waiter with a tray of food when you're showing the head, because you're going to come way up around like this. And again, with a standard size bird, these birds are a lot heavier than a bantam. If you're a junior member, showing a bantam bird is probably the way to go when you're a bit smaller and your hands are smaller. But you're going to get the bird way up like this, and you're going to tap the beak so that the judge can see the opposite side of the bird's head. Without your hand in the way, like that. Same thing if the judge wanted to see the comb. This is a great way to show the comb, and the wattles is with the bird up here, sort of at shoulder height for the judge. So that one's a little trickier. The width of the back is another easy one. Again, you would turn the bird this way and you would just run your hand down its back so that the judge can see the width of the back. The underfluff, same position for that one, and you're just going to run your hand backwards so that they can see the underfluff is kind of the color of its feathers underneath here. So you just run your hand backwards up the bird for underfluff. One of the harder ones that I find people struggle with a little bit is showing the breastbone or the keel. For that, the bird has to get rolled up against you. You have to switch hands because you want to pull the feet out this way and your hand up the breastbone. So you have to have good control over the bird for that. You give it a try, Jonah. Jonah, being relatively new at this compared to some, it's a little harder. He doesn't have his feet stretched out quite as far there. And then run your hand like this. Then the judge may, once they've asked you a few parts of the bird, then they're probably going to ask you some questions to see how well you know poultry. So they may ask specific questions about your bird. If you're a senior member, they may ask about a neighboring bird. So some of the questions that I've heard people ask over the years would be things like, what class would your bird be shown in? What kind of comb does your bird have? Sometimes they ask really simple things like, do you have a hen or a rooster there? Sometimes they'll ask things about husbandry, like what do you feed them? It's a great way for judges to find out if you're helping to look after the birds at home, if you know what they're eating. Can you think of some things you've been asked over the years, Jonah, at showmanship competition?
One thing is like, what would be a disqualification for your bird?
Yep.
A question I often get asked, and like, what's a special quality about the bird you have?
Right, like with our Americanas, they lay green eggs, or kind of going along with the disqualification question, sometimes they like to ask if you could change one thing about the bird you're showing or improve one thing about it, what would it be? If they want to get really picky, they can ask things like, what weight are they supposed to be at? So those are, again, a lot of those things are things that are in the standard of perfection, and so if you study that, you'll be all set for those questions. I remember one of my members being asked where his breed originated, like what country it was from. So yeah, there's a ton of different questions you can get asked during a showmanship competition.